great fellow podcasters who love God, love his people, and want to bring healing, encouragement, and change into your lives for the good.
And just like you might share puppy video with someone who likes puppies, if you like this podcast, if you like any of these podcasts, a good friend would share them with a friend and make them smile.
In all the good times and even the trials, through tears and through laughter, yeah, I know that I'll smile when I think of you. Smile for the things you do. Smile, God gave me you. You are the reason I smile. Yeah.
This is Behind Our Smiles.
Pursuing connection.
And finding joy.
Even in the struggle.
And welcome back to another episode of the Behind Our Smiles podcast. We are Joe and Tara Buchanan, and we're so glad that you're here.
And we love hearing from you, and we love hearing what makes you smile about your husband or wife. Whatever it is you're thinking right now, we love to hear it. And today we're hearing from Betsy, and she shared what makes her smile about her husband, Todd. And she said, my husband always sends me funny and cute memes or videos of things he knows I'll like puppies or babies. He doesn't necessarily like it, but he knows I will.
That's awesome.
Way to go, Todd.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Betsy. We'd love to hear from you as well. What makes you smile about your husband or wife? Maybe he sends you memes as well. You can drop us a line anytime. Our email address is Tara at behindoursmiles.com. And
when you love someone and you care about someone, you do send them things that you know they'll like.
Yeah.
It might be a cat video, might be puppies, or you might share with them something you're watching or listening that you just know they're going to love.
Yes.
So that's what we're doing today. We are going to share with you, not a puppy video, sorry, but we're going to share with you some podcasts we've been listening to that we know you are going to love.
Yeah, we're a part of the Wow God Podcast Network, and we have some incredible fellow podcasters who are doing tremendous work. And so we wanted to highlight a few for you. The first one we're going to highlight is actually a daily devotional. It's something you can download each day. It's about 2-3 minutes long at the most. It's called the Morning Focus Daily Devotional, and it's like one of the newest ones on the Wow God Podcast Network.
You know, we release a podcast of Behind Our Smiles every week, and that can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. It's still a lot of work to do, but they're putting these out every single day, and they never fail to put out some little nugget of something that you can take with you. The idea is if you don't have 30 minutes for a long episode, that 3 minutes in the morning on your ride to work, you're having your coffee, to plant the truth before all the lies start to get in. Yeah, and the lies can get in so easily, right? So this is a great daily devotional. Again, it's called the Morning Focus Daily Devotional. It's with Rick and McKenna. And what the real crux of what they're trying to share is what who the Bible says God is and who God says we are. And if you get those two things right in your life, if you know who God is and the character of God, and you know what God says you are, that is going to set your day and your life in a completely different direction than if you're kind of following with the lies of who we think we are or what God is like. Right. And I'll give you a quick example. One of their more recent episodes, they were sharing from Romans 4, verse 5. And they were talking about this idea that you're not the point. I'm not? No, I'm not the point. And what's the point then? They even talked about that does feel rude, right? When you're told you're not the point. But there's a big difference between you're not the point and you don't matter, because we are extremely valuable to God. But it's God's righteousness in us that makes us matter. Yes. And sometimes I like the fact they can get so much meat. They don't have to talk for 30 minutes, but you turn it off after 3 minutes. You're like, okay, I'm ready, God. I know this truth. So daily devotional, there's a lot of them. They do them every single day. So there is a whole host. They've been doing this less than a year, but there's a lot of episodes. Whatever kind of encouragement you need, even if you want to go back in their catalog. Highly recommend them. They're both amazing people, amazing. Yeah, and we'll put all about it in the show notes. Yes, the link will be right there. Yes, they are. So the other podcast that we have talked before in the past that we are very passionate about as well is Mental Health with Dr. Mork. And we talked about her before. And in fact, she was a recent guest on our podcast. On episode 140, we invited her to share about mental health issues and how they affect marriage. And it was a really, really excellent episode. She has so much grace and kindness in sharing about those things. Well, and I love the fact that she does not shy away from really tough topics.
She doesn't have to tie everything up in a bow. So she shares from a perspective of reality, right? To where I can really relate to the things that she's sharing about.
And she is a doctor, and she is qualified too. She has all of the letters that she needs to be able to share from real help and not just spammy stuff. The recent episode she shared was from episode 39. And it's like a little mini episode, like a little quick tip thing.
Yeah, I think it's like only 6 minutes long,
But she's talking about panic attacks. And, sometimes we talk about panic attacks just in hyperbole or satire, like, oh my, I almost had a panic attack. But for real, we know they're real. And if you are experiencing them or have experienced them, they're very distressing. And you can think to yourself, I don't know what to do. And she gives such great practical tips on just going, okay, here's something you can do when you feel that coming on or you're in the middle of something.
She had a tip that you shared as being something you'd never heard before.
Yes,
but if you're ever in the middle of a panic attack, or when you are in the middle of a panic attack, she said simply eat Warheads or some kind of sour candy.
I had not heard that before.
Right.
Hopefully, if you have children in their house, there might be sour candy in your house, but I don't keep that in my house. I'm like, maybe I should have some sour candy. But the way she describes it is this. She said, when I'm in a panic, my mouth goes dry. Right? If you're panicking, and my brain can tell dry mouth equals panic. So if I put something in my mouth that causes my mouth to flood with saliva, for some reason, my amygdala, the part in your brain that's kind of activated, the panic center of my brain says, oh, her mouth is swimming with spit.
So she must not be in the middle of a panic attack.
Yeah, and again, these aren't necessarily 100% whole solutions, but this idea of you just need to mitigate something, you need that little bit of help. So besides her little mini episodes, she also has a lot of stories
of hope,
real people battling real mental health diseases and illnesses and struggles and finding hope through them. So again, Mental Health with Dr. Mork. Highly recommend.
So we've talked about the Morning Show Daily Devotional podcast, the Mental Health with Dr. Mork podcast, both incredible. Another great podcast is I Love That Song with Keith Stevens.
You do love that song, don't you?
I do. I love music. And so I love the fact that he highlights a different band that you hear on Christian radio and talks through particular songs or a season of their life so you can understand a little bit of behind the music.
I could tell you something, Joe. If you had to host that podcast, you totally could, because you love talking about songs and you love getting to know the artists behind the songs. And I noticed that in your career as a music director, that you saw and understood a song so much differently when you got to know the artists and a little bit of their personal life and what was going on when they write that song. It makes you hear the music in a whole different way.
Right. And it becomes more relatable to you because you can say, I can relate to that. One of Keith's most recent interviews was with Consumed by Fire, and love that band. If you listen to Christian radio, then you're familiar with them. They've had Walk with Jesus and
First Things First. Yeah.
That was a mega hit. And what people don't know, well, number one, they're all brothers.
I love
they're
that.
The sons of pastor.
I love that. I'm like, their mom's got to be so happy.
Yeah, but they have been at this for a while. A lot of people think they had overnight success, but they've been at this for a long time. And only recently have they seen the kind of success that they're seeing. And so this particular episode, they talked about their new music and what God is doing in their lives.
Yeah, I love that. It's so many really great nuggets in there, even though they're just talking about songs. As the conversation goes on, sometimes the conversation takes a little bit of a turn. You're not sure what they're going to share about, but it's all good. And they had one little thing they shared that really struck me. He said, when God calls you to do something, this is something their dad had shared with them. He used to say, nobody should be able to talk you into it. And nobody should be able to talk you out of it. I love that. It's just something that God's doing. So they were saying, so we got to let our timelines just be surrendered to the Lord and let him work out what he's doing within us, because I feel the quickest way to burn out is going, it didn't happen by my deadline.
And it didn't happen by their deadline. And the more that you learn their story, if you want to search Consumed by Fire, it is really extraordinary because they really could have given up several different times, and they didn't, because God kept telling them to surrender their timeline. And because of that, we have incredible songs like First Things First and Walk with Jesus.
Like, I know God wants me to do it, but now I'm upset that the timeline is off. So again, if you want to know any of the stories behind your songs, he's got a lot of episodes as well. You probably can find your favorite artist somewhere in that mix.
Keith Stevens, I love that song.
And last, we discussed this last time too, is Manly with Andy. And so it's kind of a manly show. But I will tell you, I still listen to it. You're allowed to listen if you are not a man, because he does interview a lot of authors that do talk to subjects that do appeal to men primarily, and biblical manhood, and how do we worship God as a man.
I think it also helps you understand your husband and your sons better.
Yes.
Listen to the podcast.
Yeah, not entirely exclusive.
Yeah.
If you want to get a sneak peek into men's lives, I think it's a great podcast. But you recently interviewed Sam Jolman about his book that he'd written called The Sex Talk You Never Got. And Sam shares how he wrote this book for men after the fact, like not currently we're trying to get the sex talk, but okay, we've all been probably fed a combination of lies and misconceptions about our sexuality. And sometimes as adults, we got to go back and relearn things we never learned.
Yeah, and it does change
Men
things.
and women.
Yeah. And Sam even shares kind of like, this is not a book for your kids per se. It's really for their fathers, because if we don't get it right, if we don't go back and understand where the lies were and where the truth is, then we're not going to be able to pass that on to our kids. And then when we do have the quote unquote sex talk with our kids, it's going to come out all wrong and it's not going to be correct. And then they're going to have to go get this book when they're fathers.
Well, he said, because what keeps men from giving a sex talk to their kids or their sons, it's this kind of wordless shame.
Yeah.
It feels awkward. So I love that encouragement to men, saying, how can we empower the next generation to think of sexuality in a healthy, God-honoring way if we've not looked back at our own story and figured out our stuff? And so what a great challenge for men and fathers.
Well, and shame really is one of the biggest weapons that the enemy uses, especially against our sexuality. One of the greatest quotes from that episode was when Sam says, God doesn't want to terrify you or beat you up into sexual healing.
Wow.
He's drawing you into his kindness. And Sam goes on to say, I'm convinced that some of the most personal, kind, gentle conversations that Jesus had were with those stuck in sexual oppression, sexual brokenness, and sexual struggle. God has kindness for you.
Wow. So that's quite the episode. And he's got a lot more to say and a lot more to share about that from speaking men to men. And that's something that we've worked through too, the idea of going, okay, how do you break free from that kind of struggle? And I think it's a great place to start. If you like that or other topics about men, manly with Andy.
And that particular episode is episode 86. And again, like Tara said, it's Manly with Andy, and we'll have all of that information in the show notes. But the Wow God Podcast Network, if you go to wowgod.com, you can see all the podcasts that are offered through the Wow God Podcast Network. Some incredible stuff, some great fellow podcasters who love God, love his people, and want to bring healing, encouragement, and change into your lives for the good.
And just like you might share puppy video with someone who likes puppies, if you like this podcast, if you like any of these podcasts, a good friend would share them with a friend and make them smile. So we hope as well, besides Behind Our Smiles or any of the podcasts you listen to, it's great to share them with your friends. That really is how most people find things, is a personal reference. And so that's what we're doing today. We're sharing with you what we're listening to and what we think you should check out.
So we encourage you to share. If you listen to podcasts, then there's probably 4 on your list. So share about those 4 podcasts with a friend this week. We encourage you to do that. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you have any questions, or maybe you have a podcast you want to share with us, a podcast that's impacted your life, maybe we're that friend. We'd love to hear about your podcast. You can drop us a line anytime, Tara, T-A-R-A, at BehindOurSmiles.com. Your 5-star rating is huge. Your review makes a huge difference. Thank you. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.
Behind Our Smiles is a Wow God production. Discover more at wowgod.com.